Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I'm told time and time again that people aren't interested anymore in Pakistan, in Washington. But I have to say that your attendance here today goes to show that that clearly isn't true. I'm actually very grateful that whether it's here at the Atlantic Council today, whether it's at CFR or any of the other think tanks that we visited, each visit in Pakistan that I have had from Pakistan over here has gone to disprove that fact. I actually get so many requests for interviews from within the Western media over here in Pakistan that it just goes to show that absolutely the world is still paying attention, and now we are focused on how we're using this space that we had to take this bilateral relationship forward. I think everybody knows our past. We know what great things we've managed to achieve together when Pakistan and the United States have worked together, and we know where we have faltered when we have been unable to cooperate or create that consensus. What I'm happy to report is over the last seven to 8 months since I've been the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, we've had a consistent back and forth of engagement with the United States at various levels. And our sort of report card for the last 6 months of FP with US-PAC relations is that if in the last decade, 90% of our conversations were focused around counterterrorism, the war on terror, now we're engaging far more diversely on a whole host of issues, as was mentioned in the introduction. We've had exchanges on climate, we've had exchanges on tech, we've had exchanges on healthcare cooperation with our Minister of Health visiting, even potential cooperation in agriculture. We certainly do still talk about terrorism in our bilateral engagements, but we have a far more comprehensive sort of itinerary in which we are now engaging. We've seen visits before the floods of high-level US officials to Pakistan, including obviously Derek Chollet and others, but Bilawal Saeed from the State Department, who went on an extensive sort of trip in our region, but in Pakistan visited Islamabad, visited Lahore, visited Karachi, and engaged with the business community, engaged with the chambers of commerce to find ways for our business communities to find economic opportunities for us to exploit. The United States is still Pakistan's biggest customer, and there's far more economic potential for us to unlock. While we pursue these aspirations, unfortunately, the people of Pakistan are facing crises after crises, some of which are of our own making, and we have to be able to be cognizant of that and address those issues, but the majority of which are not of our own making. They're not of our own making, but they have extreme consequences for the people of Pakistan. And the way in which we engage with each of these issues, the solutions that we find for them and our ability to implement those solutions will decide the direction of Pakistan's policy in the coming decade, 2 decades. It'll decide the direction of Pakistan's economic trajectory the next decade, 2 decades, and it'll decide the direction of Pakistan's foreign policy in the times to come. What are the challenges that we are facing? Some of the challenges are challenges that are being faced all across the globe. We all are suffering from the consequences of the once-in-a-100-year COVID pandemic, which isn't over as of yet. The shadows of this pandemic are still affecting economies across the world. The fall of Kabul and the government in Afghanistan and the consequences that will have for our economy, for peace and stability in our region, not an event of our making, but something that's affecting not only Pakistan, but everybody around us, the Ukraine war and the restrictions associated with that, the economic consequences of which we have faced, you are experiencing here in the United States, Europe is facing in Europe, and the average Pakistani is facing also in the form of food insecurity, high inflation, high gas pumps, high prices at the pump. And to top it all off, as if that wasn't enough, we experienced this year what can be only described as a climate catastrophe of biblical proportions. We, for the South Asians in the audience, are used to monsoons, we're used to floods, we experience them time and time again. But this was something extraordinary. Our monsoons came early, and when they came, they just would not stop. I believe that in the Bible it says that at the time of Noah's Ark, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Well, will you believe it that Pakistan's monster monsoons lasted longer than 40 days and 40 nights? We started an early monsoon in June that went on until September, the end of September. And when that downpour, when that flooding from the sky stopped, 1/3 of the landmass of my country. Imagine the scale of that in comparative. I don't know, you guys at the Atlantic Council will probably know more as far as imagine the scale of that compared to any American state. Imagine proportionately 1/3 of America being underwater, your landmass underwater after a weather event. 1 in 7 people devastated. That's 33 million people, costing $30 billion is our damage needs assessment, $32 billion, which is about 10% of our GDP, washed away in a single climate catastrophe. That is if I'm sort of comparing all the challenges I just listed out before you, the biggest challenge for the people of Pakistan right now. If we get this right, if we get the economics right, the FP, the foreign policy right, the climate resilient angle right, then we can come up with a 5-10-year plan, and that we can start getting the funding together for. That will not only allow us to build back better, invest in the local economy while building climate resilient infrastructure, so preparing for the next climate disaster, but also benefiting those who've been affected. If we get it right, we can do it in a way that the people who are affected, once we address their needs, and I granted it'll take time, but once we address their needs and we rebuild, we can do so in a manner so that they're better off than they were at the start of the floods. If we get this wrong, this is a crisis situation waiting to implode in all our faces, which is why, ever since this disaster struck, we've been traveling the length and breadth of the world to try and raise awareness. The COP27 was good to this effect, and all our engagements are about creating opportunities for us to rebuild our lives in a better manner as a result of this catastrophe. I'm not under any delusions. I'm completely cognizant of the fact that COVID has affected everyone, that Ukraine has not only affected everyone, but crowded out everyone's humanitarian budgets, crowded out everybody else's parliament's spending capacity across Europe, here in the United States. But for me, it's important to engage internationally,